As Israel's military aggression intensifies in the West Bank, especially in Tulkarm and Jenin, Palestinian communities continue to suffer devastating losses. With widespread displacement and the destruction of critical infrastructure, thousands of civilians have been forced to flee their homes. Will Israel's aggression continue to target civilians in Palestinian territories, including Gaza and the West Bank? What consequences will this have for Palestinians, and is there any hope for a political solution to this ongoing crisis? Welcome to In Depth. Israeli occupation forces have escalated the weeks-long assault on many West Bank cities, detaining dozens of Palestinians and demolishing homes, as highlighted by Al-Ahram online. Amid the devastation, Israeli authorities have signaled plans to expand the operation, prolong it indefinitely, and prevent displaced residents from returning to their homes. With its aggression ongoing, Israel has escalated its demolition of homes in the Tulkarm and Nur Shams refugee camps in the northern West Bank. In addition, Israeli forces continued burning homes and forcibly displacing residents while deploying further military reinforcements to the city and its refugee camp. Israeli occupation forces have escalated their military aggression on the West Bank, intensifying raids in areas like Tulkarm and Jenin, displacing thousands of Palestinians and causing widespread destruction.
Israeli occupation forces have significantly increased their presence in the northern West Bank, particularly in the city of Tulkarm and the surrounding refugee camps. For over a month, the occupation forces have been carrying out raids, demolishing buildings, and targeting infrastructure, including power and water supplies, in what Israel has described as a military operation in the West Bank. In the Nur Shams refugee camp, more than 5,000 Palestinians have been forced to flee their homes due to escalating violence. Israeli occupation forces have also been conducting house searches, asserting numerous civilians, and creating an environment of fear and instability. Eyewitnesses report that Israeli occupation force bulldozers have destroyed key facilities, including shops, homes, and vital infrastructure, leaving residents with limited access to essential services. Humanitarian organizations are struggling to respond, with the World Health Organization expressing deep concern over the increasing attacks on healthcare in the region. This escalation follows a broader Israeli strategy to reshape the demographics of the West Bank, potentially as a step toward annexation, as Palestine's envoy to the UN, Riyad Mansour, stated at the United Nations Security Council. The ongoing violence has left many Palestinians displaced, vulnerable, and without adequate resources, further fueling tensions in the region and pushing the West Bank to the brink of becoming another Gaza.
For more analysis, we're joined from Occupied Jerusalem by Dr. Abdel Nasser Mekki, the political science professor, and from Cairo by Dr. Mohammed Osman, the international relations specialist. Welcome to Qnews and welcome to In Depth, sir. It's a very warm welcome and it's a pleasure to have you with us on the program. Dr. Mekki, the Israeli occupation forces have made significant advances in the northern West Bank, especially in Tulkarm and Jenin. How do you assess the long-term impact of these operations on Palestinian communities in the area?
Yes, I think this long-term operation from the Israeli forces will stay so long, and I think, as they said, the Minister of Defense, he said that it will take until the end of this year. And as you know, from the beginning...
Did you say till the end of this year, sir?
They will stay there until the end of this year. That's what the Minister of Defense said, that they will make like a bases there, like some centers inside the refugee camp as in Tulkarem and Jenin. They did this in Jenin. They removal, that's and destroy about 110 houses in the refugee camp of Jenin, and also they removable the people from there. About 20,000 people from Jenin refugee camp, they left their home, and in that time, the Israeli, what they did is that they make like a base for them in order to stay there and to monitor and watching all what happening in the camp of Jenin. And until now, just remaining few, maybe 100 people just remaining in this refugee camp, which is the number of this refugee camp people is about 27,000. This is one thing on the refugee camp of Jenin. The other one was in Tulkarem. The two refugee camps in Nur Shams, about 9,000 people. They are living there and they left. And also the refugee camp in Tulkarem, about 14,000. They also removal there by the Israeli forces. So now I think the Israeli want to reshape all these refugee camp and also at the same time they will continue make the aggression and occupation also this refugee camps. And they have their objective is that they want to continue not just in the north of part of West Bank, but also in all the West Bank. But they starting with the north of West Bank, especially in Jenin, because there are many of the resistance fighters there. And it will continue until they that's destroy and elimination in the refugee camp, and also at the same time the principle of right to return. They try to that's do damage this and to destroy it. This is their principle, and it is coming because of the Prime Minister Netanyahu promised Smotrich that in the last month.
Okay, I got your point, sir. I'll be back to you again, Dr. Osman. Your take, sir, please, on Israel's escalation in the West Bank, which comes after a ceasefire agreement in Gaza, although Israeli forces didn't withdraw from the enclave. Do you believe Israel's actions are part of a broader strategy to annex Palestinian lands?
Thank you for having me, Rana.
Always a pleasure, Dr. Mohammed.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine. Indeed, the Israelis are carrying out a coordinated policy with what I believe to be a unified goal of both the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and that is the gradual depopulation and the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people from their land. That's a very long-term strategy. And for this very long-term strategy to be implemented, campaigns like that, like those happening in the West Bank, for example, in Tulkarm and in Jenin, have to be carried out in this manner. So I'm not really surprised by what we are seeing. And actually, I believe that it will even escalate further in the West Bank in the coming days, because it seems that in return for accepting the ceasefire agreement in Gaza or acceding to it, the Trump administration gave Israel a free hand to act in the West Bank. And let's not forget that the very dubious bombings that caused no fatalities or injuries whatsoever happened in Tel Aviv that targeted a few empty buses. And of course, it's very questionable whether this, to be honest, was an inside job in order to create a pretext in order to expand the military aggression in the West Bank. And that they did. For the first time, Bran, since 2002, which was the height of the Second Intifada, the Israeli Army of Occupation is deploying tanks in the West Bank. And let's not forget that the West Bank is not like Gaza. It's not a war zone. There are no armed formations over there of the Palestinian resistance, just harmless civilians and a very few gunmen. So
Dr. Mohammed, what about the Israeli actions in the West Bank? Is this part of a broader policy of forced displacement? How do you read this, sir?
Yes, indeed. I was just explaining that this is part of a coordinated plan of forced displacement. As Dr. Mickey said, tens of thousands of people have been forcefully displaced from both Jenin and Ain Shams and Tulkarm. Estimated from 40 to 50,000 Palestinians have been forced to leave their homes. Hundreds of houses have been demolished in the refugee camp of Jenin. The Israelis are establishing a military corridor like the Netzarim axis inside that used to exist in the Gaza Strip. They are establishing a very similar military corridor inside the Jenin camp in order to divide it and ensure that the people can never come back to the Jenin refugee camp. So we are seeing a trend of depopulating parts of the West Bank, and this process is susceptible to substantial escalation in the coming weeks and months. It seems that Israel has a plan to annex at least parts of the West Bank, and in order for them to achieve that, a state of conflict has to exist in the West Bank. And this is what the Israelis are trying to provoke at the moment with their naked, unjustified, unprovoked aggression in this part of occupied Palestine.
I'll be back again to ask you about the international community and the stance of the international community, Dr. Osman. Dr. Mekki, the Israeli forces have been systematically targeting refugee camps like Nur Shams. What do you think Israel's ultimate objective is in these areas, especially given the clear evidence of large-scale displacement?
I think the Israeli forces, and especially this extreme government, as they're planning from the beginning, especially for Smotrich and Ben Gvir, is that they want to remove all the Palestinian people, starting from the refugee camp and starting from north part of West Bank. So their main objective is that they want to remove all the people there. They want to, that make their life miserable, and that these people could leave from from the West Bank. And this is, as you know, about demography issues that Israeli was worrying about the increasing number of the people in West Bank, and especially in the north part of West Bank. So, and also at the same time, they want to increase the settlements and also to establish new settlements and to increase the number of settlers. And this is their objective on the long term, is that they want this land to be for them, and that the Palestinian will leave. And this, they have some, that's even some incentives. They said that they want to give them to the Palestinian in order that they could go out and they build their, future outside Palestine, because they say that this land is for them. And this is something related to the religious things for them, especially for when talking about Judea and Samaria, which is in their religious. So the extreme government, the objective, as I said, is that they want to increase the settlements there and to remove all the Palestinian. Will start it from the north part, and they will expand to the middle, Ramallah, and after that to the southern part, especially in Hebron. And this will be in the long term. So this is the things that Prime Minister Netanyahu is promised to give it to Smotrich when they met last month, in order to convenience him to go ahead with the first stage of the agreement in Gaza.
Dr. Osman, could I please, or could you tell us more about your take on Dr. Mekki's comment now on what he said about Benjamin Netanyahu?
I think it makes sense. I completely agree with Dr. Mekki in this regard, because I think that the Israelis do have an expansionist agenda. They want to expand their occupation and their settlements inside the West Bank, and basically the land acquisitions. The Israelis, as you know, consider, as Dr. Mekki said, the West Bank as the part of the perceived ancestral land of Judea and Samaria. That's what they call it, and they want to annex the entirety of the West Bank because the hardline right-wing Israelis, and Netanyahu, it seems as well, believe that this is part of the state of Israel. By so they are completely negating the idea of the two-state solution. So it doesn't surprise me that we are seeing the expansion of settlements at the moment. Just a few weeks ago, Netanyahu has authorized the construction of over 1,000 housing units in settlements in the West Bank, which means the expansion of Israeli illegal settlements in the West Bank, something that has been condemned by the international community and even some of Israel's staunchest allies in the West. Over 600,000 Israelis have settled illegally inside the West Bank, which is internationally recognized as part of the state of Palestine, which is recognized by over 140 countries around the world, that has an observer status at the United Nations, that enjoys the membership of international and regional organizations like the Arab League, like the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, like UN specialized agencies, like the International Criminal Court even. So as you can see, and of course, settlement movement is a war crime of some sort and is a violation of international human rights law and international humanitarian law. However, that does not matter, because as long as the United States provides Israel with impunity and covers it and immunizes it from any accountability, I do not think that we will see anything that will deter Israel's behavior, blatant violations of Palestinian rights, whether in the West Bank or in the Gaza Strip.
So then this makes Dr. Osman and Dr. Mekki on the same ground as for the international community under the leadership of the United States. Your take is that the international community cannot do anything about what's happening. Dr. Mekki, we have seen, of course, if you want to answer Dr. Osman, you can answer him. But the question now is, we have seen reports of widespread destruction in the infrastructure of camps such as Noor Shams. How is this affecting the daily lives of Palestinians, and what immediate actions should be taken to address the humanitarian concerns?
I think, as you know, that in many of the video films, especially when they are focusing on what's happening in Jenin, because that it was from 40 days, and also at the same time Tulkarem and Noor Shams, which about maybe 14 days or 20 days in Tulkarem refugee camp and 14 days in Noor Shams refugee camp. That's the people in West Bank, especially in the refugee camp, they are living in the miserable life before, because the refugee camp, which was established after 1948 on the West Bank, as you know, it was in bad conditions, and there is a problem in the solid waste and also sewage system, and also at the same time they are close to each other. So I think the problem is that they are crowded and they didn't have received any services from even the international community, just from the United Nations. And as you know, now the United Nations, the UNRWA, have been forbidden to work on with the West Bank because of the Israeli. They didn't allow to the United Nations, and they accused them that they are terror with Hamas. And I think that now, after the Israeli aggression in Jenin and Tulkarem and the refugee camps, they destroy all things. They destroy the infrastructure. They destroy the houses, the mosque, the schools, and now the people left, but they didn't know where they are going, because now they are just spread on many villages in Jenin and Tulkarem, but it is just for maybe 2-3 weeks. And after that, as you know, the problem is that where they will go, because there's no any place that they could go there unless they could come back to their home. So because of this, it will reach us to ask about the international community, not just to focusing on the condemn the Israeli aggression, but also what is the solution for this? The Israeli should stop, and the Israeli should allow the people to come back to their home. Otherwise, there will be problem for them and miserable condition. So I think the problem or the condition inside the refugee camp now, it's problematic, and also at the same time, the Israeli, they destroy this refugee camp, and they made like what they did in Gaza, like in Netzarim inside the refugee camp, and it make like squares for inside the refugee camp.
Dr. Osman, the issue of forced displacement in the West Bank has been increasingly evident. Do you think this could lead to a permanent demographic shift? And of course, sir, it is mentioned by eyewitnesses that, of course, Israeli occupation forces bulldozers have destroyed key facilities, including shops, homes, and vital infrastructure, leaving residents with limited access to essential services. And of course, sir, humanitarian organizations are struggling to respond, but they're not doing anything, with the World Health Organization expressing deep concern over the increasing attacks on healthcare in the region. Your take, sir?
Well, as I said at the beginning of this interview, this is part of a coordinated long-term plan in order to displace the Palestinians out of the West Bank, or at least out of certain parts of the West Bank, in order to, as you just said, enact permanent demographic changes. And this already happened.
Sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Osman. A permanent demographic change is going to happen.
Yes,
this is your narrative.
This is what they seek to implement. It seems they never say that out loud, but from the trends of action and Israeli behavior on the ground, and the history of Israel's policies also visiting the West Bank over the past 20 years or more, do indicate that. Because, for example, the West Bank is divided to areas A, B, and C. Area A is under the authority of the Palestinian Authority, under the control of the Palestinian Authority, both security and in terms of security and civilian sovereignty. Area B is under the civilian control of the Palestinian Authority, yet under the security control of Israel. And Area C is under complete Israeli control. Area C is actually constitutes over 60% of the entire land mass of the West Bank. And do you know how many Palestinians live in Area C, which is the majority of
How many, sir? How many?
300,000 only, out of 3 million Palestinians. So as you can imagine, the policies of gradual displacement and ethnic cleansing that the Israelis have carried out over the past decades have already created demographic changes inside the West Bank. And they seek to expand that until the situation on the ground is ready and conducive to an actual forced displacement of the Palestinians out of the West Bank into Jordan. We are facing a very sinister long-term plot to completely eradicate the Palestinian cause. We have a US administration, the Trump administration, seemingly does not mind or does not object to the idea of the annexation of the West Bank. When President Trump was asked by reporters whether he fears any possible Israeli annexations, he said, and I hope I'm quoting him correctly, he said they will do it beautifully. So this does not indicate
they will do it. They will do it again, sir.
He's something around the lines of they will do it beautifully or something like that when they spoke of the annexation. So that doesn't indicate that the United States has any reservations on the annexation of the West Bank, for example. And of course, this is a drastic change in US policy towards the West Bank because previous administrations, both Democratic
Sir,
and
I think there's a drastic change from the United States and US President Donald Trump. And of course, you can say or confirm what I'm saying towards everything, towards the entire globe, sir. It's not about Israel alone. It's not about Gaza alone.
It is a substantial, dramatic change in U.S. foreign policy overall, and of course, it does affect the Middle East. The Middle East is no exception, and the Palestinian cause is part of that. However, what the Trump administration is proposing or what they are facilitating for the Israelis to do might actually ignite further unrest and instability in the region, which will not be in the interests of the United States.
Unfortunately, sir. Dr. Mickey, given the ongoing Israeli violations, do you foresee the situation deteriorating further in the West Bank? Would be another Gaza?
Going to be worse than now or before. The Israeli is they want to attack, destroy. They want to achieve implement their objectives. As they will start it with the refugee camps. They want this land to be to them, not with the Palestinian. They want to remove the Palestinian from this land. I think this is the first time that we see this. We notice that Israeli is expressed like this from 1967 until maybe before the Tufan al-Aqsa, which is starting in 7 October 2023. I think this is the first time that we saw the Israeli aggression like this, maybe from 2002, when the Israeli tank, they entered the West Bank in the operations of the wall, especially in Jenin, when there is violation and escalation between the Israeli and the Palestinian. Yeah, I think the violation will continue until there is interventions from the United States of America or also from the Arab League, because this is there. Maybe
what is the Arab League gonna do, sir, exactly?
The Arab League maybe, and I think in the next month we have that summit on Cairo, and I think the Arab League should meet. When they meet, they could maybe send a letter to the
Are you optimistic about the meeting that's going to take place at the Arab League, sir, in Cairo?
Why not?
In light of the ongoing situation?
Yeah, why not? I am optimistic, and I think this summit will be different from the other, because that's the Israeli objectives, and especially when Trump that's even give the motivation, encourage them in order to displace the people. Where they will be, these people go, they will go to the Cairo, to Egypt, or to Jordan. So I think this is also will touch the security, that's for Egypt and for Jordan, and also for all the Arab, especially all the Saudi Arabia. And they didn't want also this also massacre to be again like 1948 and 1967.
On this note, we wrap up this episode of In Depth, and the question remains: what consequences will this have for the Palestinians? Of course, the aggression which is continued to target civilians in Palestinian territories, including the Gaza and the West Bank. And is there any hope for a political situation to this ongoing crisis? We all hope, of course, for a political situation. Thank you very much for our valuable, informative guests, and thank you very much for your amazing analysis. That was Dr. Abdel Nasser Mekki, the political science professor, and Dr. Mohammed Osman, the international relations specialist. Thank you very much for being with us in today's episode of In Depth. This brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you very much for joining us, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.